Hello and welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Seabass. We will talk Vanderbilt baseball, basketball, and football. We first thank our presenting sponsor, WellSpire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. WellSpire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We also thank our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Our news today, presented by Sutherland & Belk, a Nashville-based injury law firm. Sutherland & Belk is committed to fighting for those who've been injured in car, motorcycle, and truck accidents. Check them out at sbinjurylaw.com. Vanderbilt beats Middle Tennessee State 5-2 in baseball, improves to 42-10 on the year, and heads to Kentucky Thursday for a series that will last until Saturday and will be for the SEC Championship as Vanderbilt tries to hold off Arkansas, over which it has a one-game lead. Steven Scott had a two-run home run for the Commodores in that one last night. Pitchers struck out 16 Blue Raiders as well. Our guest line today brought to you by Boll & Branch. Founded by two Vanderbilt class of 99 graduates, Scott and Missy Tannen. I have slept on Boll & Branch sheets for probably a half dozen years now. They were amazing. Had no clue how comfortable sheets were until I got these. They are fair trade certified, which means they are made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you won't want to. And if you have the sheets, try the mattress, which was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to Boll & Branch. That's spelled B-O-L-L and branch.com. Enter the promo code VANDY to get $50 off your first set of sheets. Joining us now, Seabass of WNWS. Thanks for joining us, my friend. Hope you're doing well.
Hey, I'm fine, Chris. How are you?
Who is this?
That doesn't even sound right, does it? What's going on, brother? I'm doing great.
A lot. This is one of my favorite times of the year because it is getting close to postseason baseball, which I find fascinating, and it's an interesting race in the SEC for hosting and a lot of other things. I'm looking forward to not just seeing Vanderbilt in Kentucky this weekend, and especially that Game 3 with Zach Thompson, who's phenomenal, their left-handed ace, but just watching what happens around the conference this weekend because the storylines for seeding implication and stuff like that are pretty huge.
Oh, they really are, but there's no justice in this world because I don't love college baseball the way that you do. And you've been so blessed, I guess, over the last decade with Vanderbilt having such a great program. I live for the day when the pigskin and round ball are the same way. But I do love Vanderbilt baseball, don't get me wrong. But if you just sit back and think about it, how fortunate you've been to cover a team that you love so much that has been so good for so long now.
Yeah, and things kind of got off track there in 16. You know, everybody knows what happened with Donnie Everett. I feel like that really took a 3-year toll on their program, and I feel like they're right on the verge of kind of getting back to where they left off before that happened.
Yeah, that's no longer a factor in any way, I don't think. I mean, they honor them, and it's still, that's all good. But, I mean, any results today, I think, have nothing to do with that.
Yeah, that's a lot more fun. I mean, at times it's been a pretty brutal last few years. I mean, football has had some good things and has beaten Tennessee a couple times, but still hasn't had a winning season since James Franklin left. Basketball, of course, was bad 2 years ago and just abysmal this year. So it's kind of nice not to have it's nice to have a break from that when you do this day in and day out.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, speaking of basketball, man, you know, first of all, I got to tell you, for a guy who only played 4 games, isn't it cool to see Darius Garland's stock continue to rise, even though he basically played 4 games of college basketball and is coming off an injury? And I mean, there's every possibility that he ends up in the top 5. And depending on who trades out of 3 or 4, I wouldn't be surprised maybe see him in Los Angeles maybe.
ESPN had a mock draft this morning with him going 4 overall to the Lakers. But that's just the weirdest thing. It's almost like you watch him in a uniform and you watch him playing and you watch the highlights and you're like, who were those guys? Because we didn't see that team the rest of the year. This is going to be the strangest thing 10, 12 years from now or whenever it's over, maybe longer than that, to look back because it almost feels like, in a way, it never happened. It's just the weirdest thing. I think back, I went back today. I was cleaning out a drawer. I found my credential to the McDonald's All-Star game. I'm just like, how bizarre is that? Like, if you'd sat there at the game and sat down next to me and said, yeah, this team you're about to cover is going to have a 20-game losing streak, I'd have been like, what? It's just this last 6 months for basketball has been the most bizarre thing that I have ever covered.
Well, it hadn't been boring. If nothing else, there's certainly been plenty to talk about. I'm fascinated. I'm glad for it. I think it's awesome. I'm just fascinated as to how Darius Garland's stock has continued to rise when he hasn't been playing.
Well, it's because he's good. It's because he's great.
I know he's good. I'm aware that he's good, but he got to flash for 4 games, and at that point, I don't know that he was considered one of the top 4 players.
Yeah, I know. It is a weird phenomenon, isn't it? I didn't mean to make light of your comment. It just shows you, I think, how talented that kid really was.
Well, what's crazy here, as a massive Grizzlies fan like I am, last night was a huge night for the future of this franchise. And, I totally anticipate Mike Conley being gone in the summer, probably before the season starts. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I think that it's likely to. So don't get me wrong. I'm in love with the thought of having Ja Morant as the point guard of that team for the next 10 years. But they can trade back to 2 or to 3 or 4, whatever, and I would absolutely love to see Darius Garland stay home in the Volunteer State and be the Memphis Grizzlies point guard for the next 10 years. He's not as explosive as Ja Morant, but then you tell me the point guard that was more explosive than Ja Morant coming out of college. But I'll tell you one thing: when you factor in shooting and the assist and finding the open man to go along with it, you could do a heck of a lot worse than Darius Garland. How far behind Ja Morant is he?
I don't know that he's that far behind when I've watched them both play, but let me ask you a question. As a fan, when you watch him play in the future, when you turn on the TV or the highlights and he's there, what kind of feeling is that going to bring? Is that going to be like, oh man, don't remind me of that, because you're going to think about him being at Vanderbilt and then what happened that year? Or are you just going to watch that in another way? I guess what I'm wondering, what do you think the typical fan experience is going to be when you watch him? Are they going to be happy for Darius Garland? Are they going to kind of claim him as one of their own, even though that period was basically 4 games? And you can't help but think about him without thinking of all the stuff that went wrong once he was gone.
Oh, I think that fans will certainly look and lament a little bit about what might have been, but in regards to, are they going to pull for him? Oh, yeah.
No, I didn't mean it that way. I just mean that it's kind of hard to take him out of the context of the whole season, which, again, that was not his fault, but it's like seeing your ex. It brings back a flood of bad memories a lot of times.
You got that right. Yeah. In this case, the bad terms were not because of Darius in my mind. I look, and you could talk about, well, he could have had a different procedure that did not, take him out for the rest of the season. Chris, I'd have done it too. I'd have done the exact same thing.
Oh, me too.
I don't begrudge that even a little bit.
Let's go to the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Are you in the market for auto, motorcycle, home renters, or landlord insurance? or life or commercial insurance, call Josh at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Make him yours. Give him a call. Help the program. Help yourself. Get a quote from Josh and see if he can make your insurance situation a little bit better like he did for me. VU65 says the MLB draft will begin on June 4. Some Vandy players will be taken in the draft. In the case of J.J. Bleday, he is projected to go high in first round. What is happening now in the area of teams negotiating with high prospects agents? It appears to me that J.J. is not hitting his best right now. Do you think this is a factor?
Before I answer that, let me ask you a question about JJ. I mean, because the bat and the power obviously are playing here. What about the rest of the game? What about the rest of this game? Where do you rank him as, glove, base running and all this other stuff? Do you give him the type of rankings that warrants to have him somewhere in the 5 to 8 range?
Well, he's a right fielder. Your right fielder, for the most part, isn't a speed demon. He's not that. He's not overly slow either, but he's not going to steal a lot of bases. He runs well enough to field his position. He's got a really good arm. He'll make some mistakes in the field, like he had a lapse in concentration the other day, but he's a pretty good right fielder overall. I don't think that there's anything there that is really a black mark against him. He is what he is. He's a potential high average hitter or good average hitter with the power that has come. I just think he is what he is. You look at all the bells and whistles. Would you like to have a guy that could steal 30 bases? Sure. But he's not that guy. Most right fielders are not. I think he's fine with what he is. And the question with me will just be, he's sort of in this transition as a hitter where he's gone from a line drive guy to more of a power guy. And there's been a little bit of a 5 or 6 gap in game gap in production now, but he's not been bad either. I don't see any really red flags there.
So when do you, look, I know it's a difficult question to answer because each team has their own issues in regards to their depth chart and what they need and all these other things. But when, as a GM, do you feel comfortable in pulling the trigger on JJ? Let's say all things being equal, is he a top 5 player in your mind?
I've seen him in one mock draft at 4 this week. I've seen him at 6 in BA's rankings today. I don't know if that was a mock draft, but that was where they put him. I think anywhere in there is fine. Again, he's becoming a little bit of a different player, and I guess that comes with a little bit of caution, but I like what I see. I don't have any problem pulling the trigger around them if I'm a GM, because the thing is, before he became this guy, he was just a super productive hitter in another way.
Right. Yeah. I don't consider this to be an overly great high school year as far as prep players go. In this draft, I think more of the better players, there's a couple, but more of the better players are college. And I mean, I guess wouldn't you have to say, I know he leads the nation in home runs, but would you have to consider him the premier power hitter in college baseball?
Andrew Vaughn's in that discussion, I think. Adley Rutschman maybe isn't as much of a power guy as he is. Of course, he's a catcher, so he's a different guy. He's in that conversation for sure. The guy at Tulane's hit a lot of home runs too. His name escapes me, and he's a pro prospect, I think, next year. I mean, he's on the short list for sure. I have not dug in with every one of those other guys, but he's up there.
Yeah. For me, JJ sits somewhere. I think San Diego has 6. I love JJ. I need a plus fielder in the outfield for sure. I think they've got plenty of power going forward right now. So I don't know that I want him at 6, but I think he's somewhere in that 6 to 10 range. I don't really see him as a top 5 player, but I mean, good grief, Chris. There's no sin in somebody being a 6 to 10 player overall in the major league draft.
I think the Marlins were in to see him this weekend, and they picked 4. By the way, I believe the Padres picked him in the 30s, maybe around 39 out of high school, if I remember that correctly.
Yeah, and it's just the thing is now, if you look in their outfield right now, you got guys like Myers and Renfroe and Reyes. Those are all big guys who can swing the lumber that are average to below average fielders. and they need a little something more athleticism wise in the outfield. So I mean, they could, because I don't think it'd take too long for him to transition in, but I don't know that's where they go. I think he goes somewhere between 7 and 10, to be honest.
He'll be fine and right, man. I don't think that's a concern. Like I said, he's not going to be a superstar out there, but I think he'll be good enough with his bat. I mean, and how much of an impact do you really make in right field if you can make most of the plays and you've got a good arm, which he does?
And that's right, and I certainly agree with that. I just I think they're okay there with Reyes. So I mean, but they drafted him once. You never know. We'll see. You never know what Preller's going to do.
Okay, series of football and basketball questions from Cortez James. Who do you expect to be the QB starter opening day? He says, I'm personally rooting for Deuce Wallace.
And I am too, Chris. I mean, if you make me pick it, it's just because I don't know Riley. I know I've seen Riley at Ball State and all he did, and that's great. But all things being equal, I don't think there's a whole lot separating these two. Yeah, probably Deuce. Probably Deuce. It's good to see him getting back after, obviously not being able to play and be with the program last year, to coming back, and then before that having a very effective spring early on. I'm kind of excited to see what he can do.
Question number 2, how do you feel about the current offense for the Commodores? Do you feel like the offensive line will make or break the team?
Will it make or break the team? No, I don't think it'll make or break the team, but it is extremely important. There's no question about that. Look, it's like I told you last week, we've got skill position players that have the ability, and I know you understand what I mean, have the ability to make an offensive line better than they actually are. And what I mean by that is a guy like Keyshawn Vaughn. Keyshawn Vaughn is so good. I mean, that's an NFL starting running back right now, in my estimation. So he can make up for some sins that an offensive line might commit, whereas other running backs would they would have no way of escaping or getting through, or they don't have that gear that gets them to the slightest of holes that you weren't really able to open, that he could slither through. I think that having a guy like Key, having proven receivers to get a separation from SEC DBs, I think a tight end who's projected to go in the first round creates the type of mismatches that keep defenses up at night, defensive coordinators up at night, so that, if we have a decent, effective enough quarterback, look, don't get me wrong. It's very necessary to have a good offensive line. It will make this team so much better. But I think our skill position players can help overcome some of that while they kind of gel and we figure out who's going to do what. Much more so than, let's say, like if the defensive line gets pushed around again the way that it has in the last couple of years and you can't stop anybody at the point of attack, that would break the team. Because they're not good enough on the back end to overcome that. So, is it important? Heck yes. Is it the thing that breaks this team? I don't think so.
This is on basketball. Why isn't Jerry Stackhouse going after Walker Kessler? Stronger. He's a 7'5" star.
I mean, I guess he looks at what he sees and talks it over with David Grace, and maybe he doesn't fit what he's wanting to do. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I mean, I know that you and I talked about Walker Kessler many times. I know you like him a lot. I know you also have a little bit more reserve. You're a little bit more reserved than some of the other folks that thought maybe he was we could have him for 1 year and he'd be gone. If I remember correctly, you don't think that he's that type of ilk, but that certainly somebody that could definitely help and is a skilled player, but would need some time.
Yeah, there is no way the kid that I saw in December is one and done. He's going to need 2, maybe 3 years. And I think that look, here's what I saw. I saw a kid who's 7'1", who was preoccupied with outside shooting, which he wasn't that efficient at. He didn't dominate inside. He got some good rebound and block numbers, but he didn't control the interior like he could. Now, look, his guards could not get him the ball, and it was harder to make an evaluation, but he needs to put on weight. He probably needs to get a little faster. He is not the come in and dominate and go in the lottery next year guy that you might think of with the star ranking. I'm not knocking the kid. It's just what happens with kids who grow quickly, who are big at that age. It takes them a little longer to develop. And he is making his game more like almost a shooting guard than he is a big man. He's just an odd player. I think the previous staff wanted to make him into kind of a Luke Cornett. I don't know if this staff's objectives are going to be the same. And he was really close with that old staff, which is why you see him pop up with Gonzaga now, because he and Roger Powell were very close. I just think that ship has probably sailed for them.
Right. And, that's fine. I mean, look, this team, it's tough to see them passing on talent right now. But, I mean, I would like to think that they have an idea of what they want this program to look like and what that roster, what they want that to look like. And, I mean, the only thing I could possibly figure is that they feel he doesn't fit that mold. And maybe you have some more insight as to why they think that. I don't know. At this point, because I know they were going after, and I know they're not quite the same player. I know they were going after the Vanover cats who I saw ended up at Arkansas. I wasn't surprised to see that. I know he's a little bit taller than Walker is, obviously, but I mean, are they very different players?
Let me ask you something. What is recruiting mostly about? I mean, besides the stuff that Will Wade does. Yes, relationships. And they just don't have relationships with kids. They had a relationship with Vanover. Grace was with him at Cal. He went to Arkansas today, which is home. They just didn't have a relationship with Walker Kessler. It is what it is. That's why I'm not saying that getting rid of the staff was the wrong thing to do, but the minute you did that, you really reset recruiting, because I think they still probably had a chance with Kessler and Johnson. Maybe not. Maybe 0 for 20 really dinged them enough where they weren't going to have a shot. But I think once they made that change, that probably ended their shot for good, realistically, with both those kids.
And that's the result of it, And I'll just say this: I'm fine with that. I can put my head on the pillow at night. I'm not going to not make a move if I think it's needed because of Walker Kessler and Keon Johnson. I'm sorry, they're not that type of players.
Yeah, the whole thing was. It's really crazy how the season unfolded. They were counting on Garland and Chateau to bring them to another level where they could start attracting that type of kid on a more regular basis. Everybody knows what happened. We've rehashed it on the program 50 times, but this was always going to be a reset year for them, realistically. Now you throw the 20-game losing streak and a coaching change on top of it. I think that's why I've been trying to tell people, look, this is not a job where they're going to walk in and get miracles right away, because on top of that, you've got to go out and develop an entirely new set of relationships with kids, and the payoff for that usually comes about 18 months down the road.
Right. Yeah. It's not an overnight thing, and you're certainly correct about that. And we're going to have to be patient. And look, I mean, that's tough for us to do given the way things have unfolded the last couple of years, and people are ready for Memorial to rock again and all this other stuff. But I mean, I think we have to accept the fact, and I'm willing to, I really am, that this is going to be, I mean, trust the process, right, Chris? It's going to be a process, and you're going to have to accept that. This is not a 20-win team next year. I just don't think under any circumstances. So you never know. I wouldn't think so. But it's just one of those deals where you're going to have to accept the fact that there were people that you weren't going to get as a result of making the switch, and that there are going to be some growing pains along the way. You just hope that Coach Stackhouse and Coach Grace and Cats and the Grizzlies and whoever this third assistant's going to be, if we ever hire him, all are on the same page, get a great plan together, and can implement it and get the type of players in here that can help them fill that out. It's just with the understanding that won't be in 2019.
We got a few more questions to get to, and I know we need to get to them quickly for your sake, but just a thought on that. Right. Barring probation or some sort of a tragedy like the baseball team went through, could things have possibly gone worse for basketball over the last, say, 6 months to a year than they did? I can't think of anything that could have happened that was worse. And like, if you had said, draw up your worst case scenarios, what happened over the last year, I don't think would have even been on my radar as a realistic possibility. It just was that bad.
Well, I can't really think of anything else. I don't even want to try to imagine that. No, it went as bad as it possibly could.
Okay,
That's all I'll say.
Woody VU66 says, I feel like the whole football season is going to come down to offensive line play. This offensive line looks scary bad on paper. Is there any hope these guys can at least get in someone's way so our skill position players can make some plays?
Well, I mean, I know that we knew about the Drew Richmond thing. Obviously, that didn't work out. He ended up with USC. Wasn't that right, Chris?
Correct. I thought they were going to get him a month or two ago.
They needed him. I mean, not that Drew Richmond is anybody's savior on the offensive line. He's not. But they needed something. I mean, they're really going to have to hope that a couple of guys pop. That a couple of cats that maybe you weren't expecting, the light comes on, they bulk up a little more over the summertime, and get focused and come in and play well. But yeah, I mean, like somebody asked a minute ago about it breaking the team. I don't think so, and I told you why. But it's not because of them themselves. This offensive line terrifies me, personnel wise. I don't even know who that would be that would step up. I mean, I'm trying to think of a guy that's okay. He's right there. Boy, if he can just take that next step, he's going to be a really good offensive lineman. I don't know who that would be.
How about Cole Clemens?
Well, I mean, Cole's a guy who's got plenty of experience. There's no question about it. I think he's projected right tackle, right?
Yeah, maybe right guard. I think, I'm trying to remember the depth chart I had. I think we had him at right guard, but that was also with some thinking that maybe they were going to get Drew Richmond. So I'd have to go back and look at that again. I mean, Bryce Bailey could be a factor there. Tyler Steen could be a factor there.
Yeah, see, the problem is these names that you're going to name are names that haven't done it before.
Yeah, you're right.
But that doesn't mean they're capable. It just means they haven't done it. And I'm hopeful that one of those two take that next step. We could really, really use Dan Hawkins taking that next. I mean, because he's already physically there, but that doesn't make him a good football player. That means he's big and strong. There's plenty of big and strong guys. This is the SEC. Can you play football? Guys like that. Can Sean McMorrow, can he take that next step? And we saw him do some things, but what if we need him to be an everyday lineman, a week-to-week lineman that doesn't come out of the lineup with a couple of plays? Is he ready to do that? I don't know that. Tyler Steen, like you mentioned, bouncing back and forth. Can he become a productive guy there on the interior of that offensive line? You mentioned Bryce Bailey. I'll say one thing. Bryce Bailey, for my money, had one of the most impressive highlight reels that I've seen for a high school offensive lineman that's come to Vanderbilt in the past 6 or 7 years. I really liked Bryce's tape coming out of Indiana. There's a skill set there. There's no question about that. He's a guy that I would look to that maybe fits that if some things come together, he could be that guy. Maybe that's Bryce.
I want to provide a little bit of a ray of hope here. Okay. And this isn't necessarily a prediction, but it's something to consider. Do you remember when we did our preview podcast for the Texas Bowl? And why it is we thought Vanderbilt probably had the edge between those two teams? Do you remember what that was?
You'll have to remind me, bro. I remember doing it, but you'll have to remind me what was said.
Okay, I looked at Pro Football Focus grades. Now, granted, the guy that does Vanderbilt and the guy that does Baylor are different, so they may have different standards. Some may be an easier grader than others, so it's not perfect. But I looked at that, we looked at that, and their offensive line was not very good. They had three really mediocre guys, and what did they put on Vanderbilt? 690 yards? And why was that? Well, for one, the defense was terrible, but they had a mobile quarterback in Charlie Brewer who just gave them fits. Now, I don't know that anybody they have is going to be that mobile, but the point is when you're mobile, that undoes some sins, and I think that's a possibility for this team. Now, to the degree that it happens, we don't know, but I think it's something that every time I think the offensive line scares people, and I understand why. I'm not saying that it's not a concern because it is, but I think that does a lot to mitigate where they are weak potentially.
I agree. And, I'll tell you one thing that you have seen in the recruiting for Coach Mason and this stat at the quarterback position over the last few classes is that they're looking for that combination. Think about it. Not just Deuce, but bringing in a transfer like Riley Neal, but Walters can move around a little bit. Ken Seals can move around. And then, of course, Muhammad, who, man, I know it's a spring game, but good grief. Didn't that guy look to you like he was confident playing, the quarterback position, making that jump from Clemens High School in Alabama to the SEC? Look, he's not going to be the starting quarterback this year. That's not what I'm saying. But he had an air of confidence and ability about him that I liked a lot. But all those guys, from the guys that are there now, the one we got committed, they all seem to be pretty mobile quarterbacks. None of those guys are pure pocket passers.
By the way, Jamil Muhammad will be their quarterback 2 years from now, from everything I'm hearing.
Well, but I could also say to you, what about Ken Seals? I hear what you're saying, and that's probably going to be the case, and I don't think that's a bad deal, but that Seals cat looks like a pretty good quarterback to me, too. He looks like a better quarterback prospect coming out of high school than Muhammad did, but I really loved what I saw out of Muhammad in that spring game.
Yeah, he's turned some heads around there from what I hear. I guess that's projection a little bit because he had the early start with spring practice. He'll have a year. I would think when in doubt, you go with more experience. So maybe that'll reverse, but I think they're in a good spot there with those two kids. Let's see a couple more because I know you've got to get out here early. Vandy Doors 04 asked a doozy of a question, basically with what we do with $300 million and some other stuff. I'm going to table that one to the next podcast because we don't have time to get into that. I'm going to finish with two more with apologies to Vandy Doors 04. Don't let us forget this one for next podcast because that one could be a podcast in its own answering that one. But let's go to Dusty Orleans. You're a Vandy baseball player. What is your walkout music? And he asked us both. I will let you go first.
Oh, man. Excellent question. Man, golly, Bill, you know how I am with my music, Chris. It's all over the map. Okay, my walk-up music. Can I do two? Is that okay? Can I do two?
Sure, you can change if you get in a slump.
Okay, one to get me hyped up. All right, this is the one that I think I would play if I was ready to try to knock the cover off the ball and destroy the opponent. Would be Only One by Slipknot. But if I was in my chill mode, it might be The Ghetto by Eric B. and Rocky.
I think I'm going to go, and I've got several that I've thought about, which I cannot remember at this point in time, but the one I keep coming back to is Satisfaction by Rolling Stones. I think the start of that is pretty classic.
I don't know. I had you pegged for some Neil Sedaka or something like that.
No, thanks.
John Waite.
John Waite. Missing You is not going to be my walk-up song. Sorry. That's the only John Waite song I can think of. Last one from Utah Ozzy. If you could guarantee a second place SEC finish in every sport for the next 10 years, but you had to finish second to UT in every instance, would you take it?
You ready for this?
Yeah.
Close your ears, Shirley. Hell yes. Yes, all day long. Let me explain why. Because this might be a true quandary for some Vanderbilt fans, not for me. And don't get me wrong, with every beat of my heart, and I don't mind telling them that. But my hatred for UT does not trump my love for the black and gold. My love for the black and gold is one of the single most important things in my life. And if I'm finishing second in the SEC every single year, I'm a 9-3 team. I'm a 24-25 win basketball team that's going to the Sweet 16 many times. Yeah, easily. I mean, they would suck that UT's rolling, and I'd hate the smug look on their face. But yeah, Vanderbilt's success matters more to me than Tennessee's failures.
In a football context, let me put it this way. They have not finished second in the SEC East or in the SEC overall, I think even once since we were born. So basically, you have your 10 best football seasons back to back for a decade. Yeah, I think just on football alone, you take that. Now, the place where it hurts is baseball, but look, postseason is where you want to be. You want to be a national seed, that kind of thing. You're second in the East. You're going to get a host spot most of the time, and you got your chance to do your damage there. Yeah, you take that.
Yeah, you take it all day long. That's a fun question, but it's also a very easy question for me.
Not to mention, of course, they don't have divisions in basketball, but finishing second or in that vicinity is not a place where they've been a lot either. So,
yeah. So do we share the same answer then?
Oh, yes. Now that's where that's miserable is having to hear about it every day. But yes, I think if you're Vanderbilt, you take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I just tell them to choke on a bullfrog and sell it. Though I got to be honest, man, it would suck. So I'm not used to. Hey, Chris, how cool does this sound? And I'm mainly talking football here. I'm not used to losing to them.
That is crazy.
I'm not used to losing to them. And don't get me wrong. I'll tell you right now. I think the most fun I've ever had at a Vanderbilt sporting event was last year's 38-13 when I'm sitting in that Section A screaming at the top of my lungs after the game to the fans that were still left at that stadium by the time the game was getting ready to end. And there wasn't many of them left, screaming at them to get out of my. I mean, it was. And I understand that, but yeah, that does not trump my love and hope of the success for the black and gold.
Let's put it this way, too. That dynamic is different because when UT's been ahead of Vanderbilt in football, it's usually been by light years. If you're nipping on Tennessee's heels, that's a different dynamic.
Right.
That's not, we got you 65-0 the year before. That's, okay, you might be little brother, but you're little brother that can put the fear of God into most people.
Totally agree. Feel the exact same way. And I was, while I was answering my question, I was sitting there wondering, I wonder where Chris is going to fall on this. I thought you and I might be in the same position here, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, that didn't take much thought. Hey, man, I know you got to go, which is why we're cutting the podcast short today. Tell people about your show, where they can find it on air, where they can find you on Twitter, please.
Okay. First of all, my show is awesome. It's called The Cheap Seats. And this Saturday, by the way, Chris, in 3 days, will mark the 20th year that I've been doing this. Heck yeah. It's called The Cheap Seats, 101.5 in Jackson, Tennessee. You can listen online at WNWS.com. And you can always find me on Twitter at CheapSeatsBass.
Thanks, my friend.
You're welcome, my friend.
He's Seabass. I'm Chris Lee, host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thank you for listening. Should have a couple more episodes rolling out later in the week, so keep listening, and thank you for doing so.